Jim and Andrew Baxter. Jim and Andrew Baxter were Black American fiddle player, Jim Baxter, and Black American Cherokee singer and guitar player. They were a father-son duo from Gordon County, Georgia, who recorded in the 1920s. They were very well known in their day and played all around North Georgia and beyond. They played tunes like KC Railroad Blues, the G-Rag, and 40 Drops. These guys played a lot with a group called the Georgia Yellowhammers. Which again, the Georgia Yellowhammers was a white group that lived pretty much in the same community, and they played together all the time. Now this is way before television, so a lot of their performance, public performance, was done by way of radio. And as the story goes, a lot of times they used Jim Baxter to sub for their original fiddler. And yeah, again, as the story goes, because it was on radio, they made a point of not revealing the fact that the fiddler was black. So the group often played with Andrew and Jim Baxter from Curryville, Georgia. Curryville was also home to the music legend Roland Hayes. Andrew Baxter's unique style of fiddle is heard in early recordings of a band favorite called the G-Rag. The Baxters were African Americans, which was an unusual collaboration of the time, period. The band released one of the top-selling records of 1920 Southern music with 1927's release of The Picture on the Wall, My Carolina Girl. The 1927 recording session with the Baxters took place in Charlotte, North Carolina, and was a rare integrated session, which was uncommon even though in the late 20th century. Often because of Jim Crow laws of the South, the Baxters had to ride in separate cars, though they traveled together a lot. They often recorded their own sessions separately. One of the exceptions was the recording of the G-Rag in 1927. Andrew Baxter and the Georgia Yellowhammers. Arnold Schultz. Anybody here ever hear of Arnold Schultz? I'll tell you a little story. Back when we were dancing as the Greengrass Quaggers. We started out, we were dancing at all of the big bluegrass festivals. And so we danced with Jimmy Martin, we danced with Bill Monroe, we danced with all the big bluegrass bands. And one year, we were dancing at, I believe it was the Angiers Festival, and Bill Monroe walks over to me and says, "You know, you remind me a lot of a fella I used to play with, many years ago." But he didn't mention a name. And so, I was 19, I was like, okay. So, and years later, I'm doing this search for, talking to all the old guys and saying, "Hey, you guys ever played with any black fiddlers in your community?" And, "Yeah, but they're all dead now." But again, here I was, looking and, for black fiddlers. And what I found was Arnold Schultz was the person that Bill Monroe was saying that I reminded him of. And so Arnold Schultz, born 1886 to 1931, was an influential black American fiddler and guitarist who is noted for a major influence in the development of the thumb style, or they call it the Travis picking style, that's Merle Travis picking style of playing guitar. The son of a former slave, Schultz was born in Ohio County, Kentucky, into a family of touring musicians. In 1900, he began studying guitar under his uncle and developed a jazzy thumb style method of playing guitar that eventually evolved into the Kentucky style for which such musicians as Chet Atkins and Merle Travis would be known. Professionally, Schultz was a laborer, traveling from Kentucky through Mississippi and New Orleans. In the 1920s, he played the fiddle in a white hillbilly and Dixieland band of Forrest Falk. He also played with Charlie Monroe and gave Bill Monroe his opportunity to play his first paid gig, which was actually a square dance. Though he was not recorded, his blues playing had a powerful influence. Bill Monroe has openly cited Schultz as an influence on his playing, and Schultz taught his guitar methods to Kennedy Jones, who disseminated the thumb style methods further. His methods were passed down to Merle Travis and Ike Everly. Schultz died in 1931 of a heart problem, though legends have persisted that he died as a result of a poisoning by a white musician who was jealous of him. Less colorful reports indicate that he suffered a stroke while boarding a bus. The International Bluegrass Music Association, actually at the end of this month, they're doing their big street fair or convention down in Raleigh, North Carolina, of which I'm playing. And thank you. But more recently, over the past couple of years, to acknowledge Arnold Schultz and his connection with Bill Monroe, they have started what they call the Arnold Schultz Fund, which is a grant to young musicians to basically learn and study mostly bluegrass music. This is a picture of Arnold Schultz. He's the guy standing there in the middle with the fiddle. This is Uncle Penn standing on the left with the baton. The guitar player is an unknown person, and the person playing the bullnose, I think they call him the bullnose bass, is Lester Schultz, Arnold's brother. But as the gravesite states, this is Arnold Schultz, and I can't read it from there. I can't read it from there either. You know, we were talking earlier, and yeah, I usually carry a projector, and so I have a really big screen. There's a reason for that. Okay, Leslie Riddle. Anybody here ever hear of Leslie Riddle? Okay. Leslie Riddle from Burnsville, North Carolina. Leslie Riddle was born in June 13 of 1905, Silver's Gap community of Yancey County, North Carolina. When he was in his mid-teens, Leslie had a horrible accident in which his right foot slipped into an auger in the floor of a cotton mill. The giant screw chewed off his leg up to the knee. Oh my God, ouch. This handicap allowed Leslie a lot of downtime, and he became interested in playing guitar. His mother's brother, Ed Martin, played guitar and knew dozens of blues and gospel numbers. Ed taught Leslie some guitar techniques and introduced him to other musicians around Kingsport. Leslie was barely healed from his leg amputation when he and his uncle were arguing over in which he ended up grabbing the end of a shotgun that discharged and then blew off his middle fingers. So if you notice, hanging over the top of the guitar, he only has 3 fingers there. So anyway, he had to adjust his picking techniques to use only his thumb, index, and little fingers. John Henry Lyon's front porch was a favorite hangout for all of the East Tennessee musicians and others traveling through the area. Blind Lemon Jefferson, Styx and Brownie McGee, Steve Tardar, and others frequented the porch. In the late 1927, A.P. Carter, from the Carter family, paid a visit to the porch looking for songs for Carter family's recording session, and Ralph Peer of Victor Records. As Leslie described it, John Henry passed the guitar to Leslie and told him to play Mr. Carter a piece. He played him a couple pieces, and Mr. Carter wanted him to go home with him right then and there. So as it turns out, Leslie Riddle was a gateway into the hills and the hollows, and a lot into the black community, where the A.P. Carter basically followed him around and collected songs. And from the stories of Leslie, the Carters were not very prolific writers, but a lot of what they did was they collected tunes, and then through their notoriety, they got a lot of airtime and played the tunes on TV, on radio. Leslie's association with the Carters began a musical partnership that lasted over 5 years, and a friendship that endured half a century. Leslie would spend as much as 2 weeks at a time with A.P. and Sarah Carter in their home in Macy Spring, Virginia. Just down the road lived Maybelle and Ezra Carter. As Leslie would later describe it to Mike Seeger, I played somewhere all the time. Sometimes down at Ezra's, most of the time at Mr. Carter's, just playing and singing. That's all they would do. What the Carters got from these jam sessions was Leslie's repertoire of blues and gospel songs. Songs he had learned from Steve, Blind Lemon, Brownie, and John Henry, and others he had heard his mother and Ed Martin sing. Leslie told Seeger that the Carters rarely ever played for him, and that was Mike Seeger. Gifford Bailey, anybody ever heard of him? Okay. John Henry. So Deaford Bailey was an American country music and blues star from the 1920s until 1941. He was the first performer introduced on the Grand Ole Opry, and the first black American performer on the show. Most members of his family played instruments, and his grandfather, Lewis Bailey, was a champion fiddler. The tunes they played were part of a rich tradition of string band music, the style Deaford called black hillbilly music. In early opera years, the show embraced all types of indigenous music and made no attempts to limit itself to all white audience. In fact, efforts were made to attract a colored audience. The Opry and all WSM shows were designed to sell national life insurance. A large portion of national life business consisted of small policies popular with both black and white low-income customers. Judge Hay told Deaford that half the money came from the black people. Deaford was known only as a radio star on the Grand Ole Opry, and most of the audience did not know that he was a black man. His race may have been known in the black community, but it was not mentioned on air. This was not accidental. Judge Hay believed that Opry fans would blow us out if Deaford's race was publicized. His concern was proved very wrong. In early 1933, WSM organized the Artist Service Bureau, a booking agency designed to promote personal appearances for the WSM stars. By this time, Deaford was one of the most popular musicians on the Opry. Surprisingly, when his race became apparent on tour, it seemed to make little difference to audiences. Uncle Dave Macon was the Opry's favorite performer, and I was second, says Deaford. Roy Acuff recalled that Deaford would always draw a crowd when out on the road. All of the major acts took Deaford with them to guarantee a larger audience. Anybody hear of Howard Armstrong? Louie Bluey? So I had the privilege of impersonating Howard Armstrong, or Louie Bluey, once as well. I was in Port Townsend, Washington. There's a festival called the Festival of American Fiddle Tunes. And one of the first times I went there, Howard Armstrong was basically playing, teaching that week, teaching workshops. So I took his blues fiddle class. But prior to that, as Greengrass Cloggers, we traveled, again, pretty much internationally and did all the big folk festivals. So I got to know Howard. The Tennessee Chocolate Drops was his preceding band. But when I met him, he was a trio called Martin, Bogan, and Armstrong. And they, like the Greengrass Cloggers, played all the big folk festivals during that time. But anyway, when I took his blues fiddle class in Port Townsend, I got to dress up like him for our student showcase. And it was the only blues fiddle tune I ever played. And I can already play it now, but I'm an old-time fiddler. It's in my blood. But William Taft Howard Armstrong was born in Dayton, Tennessee, grew up in Lafayette, Tennessee. He was the middle son of a musically talented family of 9 children. His father was also a musician and supported the family with a job in a local steel mill. As a young teenager, he taught himself to play the fiddle and joined a band led by blind Roland Martin and his brother Carl Martin. They toured the United States performing a wide range of music, from songs, spirituals, through popular Tin Pan Alley tunes and foreign language songs. For a few years, Howard attended Tennessee State Normal School as opposed to abnormal school. He was an art student studying painting and design, while also playing cello in the symphony orchestra and fiddle in a jazz band. Armstrong, his brother Roland Armstrong, and Carl Martin, billed as the Tennessee Chocolate Drops, recorded on Vocalion Records at the St. James Hotel in Knoxville, Tennessee on April 3rd, 1930. Adding guitarist Ted Bogan, the band toured as part of the Medicine Show and backed blues musicians such as Big Bill Broonzy and Memphis Minnie. As Martin, Bogan, and Armstrong, they also performed at the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago. In 1934, Martin, Bogan, and Armstrong recorded the State Street Rag and Ted Stump for Bluebird Records, with Armstrong using the stage name Louie Bluey, which had been given to him by a fan. Joe and Odell Thompson.
Wait a minute. And then gonna go black hand. Black hand? Yeah.
So, Joe and Odell Thompson were among few old-time string band musicians still active in the South through much of the 80s. They were first cousins who made their homes near the Alamance and Orange County line north of Mebane, North Carolina. Born and raised on farms in the area, they grew up helping their parents tend crops of tobacco, cotton, corn, and wheat. Joe's father had learned the fiddle from his father, who was a slave, and later taught Joe. Joe told me, personally, that he made his first fiddle strings from a screen door wires, and that by the time he was 7, he was playing a real fiddle at dances. Joe and his brother Nate, along with the first cousin Odell, formed a string band and played all over North Carolina. Making music was much valued in their households and in their communities. Joe and Odell's fathers, Walter and John Arch Thompson, were consistently sought after by neighbors, black and white, to play for square dances. Now, the first time I met Joe Thompson, I was at the Merle Fest, and Alice Gerard was coordinating the old-time stage at Merle Fest that year. And so I called her up and said, hey, I'd like to come, can I be of assistance? So she said, oh, come on down, Earl. So I get there, and I'm hanging out, and I'm playing. And she walks over to me and says, Earl, I have someone I want you to meet. So she walks away, and she comes walking back, and she's walking next to this old black man, and he looks up and he sees me playing, and I thought the guy was gonna die. He just went like that, like, oh, Lordy. And I stopped playing, I ran over and said, oh, I'm a respiratory therapist, so I run over and I'm like, oh, are you okay? And Alice introduced me to him, and he said, yeah, I'm fine. I thought I was the only one. And it turned out, all the people that he played with in his community had long gone and died. And so, incidentally, it's amazing because that same year, there was an article that came out in the newspaper that said, the last of the black old-time fiddlers. And my aunt calls me up and says, my middle name is Travis. So she says, Travis, if he's the last of the black old-time fiddlers, what are you? And I was like, they got it all wrong. But anyway, as a result, I got to meet Joe, and I subsequently went to visit him in my search for black fiddlers. And again, as he said, I was hoping he could introduce me to other people in his community that he played with. And he said, well, they basically all pretty much died. And so it was shocking for him to see me play. After that, I was then teaching at the Swannanoa camp down in Swannanoa, North Carolina. And I had a bunch of young people who were taking my fiddle class, of which some of them ended up, next time I saw them, they had evolved into the Carolina Chocolate Drops. Owen Walker. Anybody hear of Doc Roberts? Fiddler? Yeah, well, Doc Roberts from Madison County, Kentucky, was one of the most recorded fiddlers of his day, cutting over 80 sides of Paramount, Gennett, and Art in the 1920s and 30s. What is known as Owen Walker, as described by record producer Roland Nevins, Doc Roberts' main stylistic influence was a renowned black fiddler, Owens, born in 1857, who taught Roberts most of his tunes. Martha Campbell was one of the first tunes recorded by Doc Roberts in 1925. He remastered the tune in 1929 to an electrically recorded version on the Sears label. Music historian Charles Wolfe believed the tune related to Roberts, Brickyard Joe, was learned from fiddler Owens of Madison County, Kentucky, and Mentor around 1915. Owen Walker is the source of 80% of Doc Roberts' tunes. Jeff Titan